UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for a new global order that works for all. He's calling for a world government, everybody. Prophecies foretell that a world government will be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, the New World Order Guterres is calling for is that world government, and I will prove it to you on this edition of the Endtime Show. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I do thank you for joining me on this edition of the Endtime Show. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, our world is facing existential challenges, but the global community is more fragmented and divided than at any time during the past 75 years. Well, he's highlighting the need for a global order that works for everyone. He wants a truly fully functional world governing body that has enforcement methods. He wants to be able to dictate to nations and individuals rather than having a General Assembly meeting once a year and suggesting things or demanding what happens in Israel, but nobody pays any attention to him. It's galling him. Mr. Guterres also pointed to his new agenda for peace that was launched last July, and it's aiming to update global collective security. In other words, they're moving more and more towards a fully functioning world governing body, and these security systems through what he calls a more networked and inclusive materialism, nations working together and promoting a world governing body. Well, the new agenda for peace that he's talking about here, and that has been mentioned many times, will be discussed at the Summit of the Future to be held in September at the UN headquarters in New York. Now, if I had to put a title on today's lesson, it would be the Summit of the Future is World Government. That's what they're pushing here, and I want you guys to understand what's really going on, because this is the world they're trying to. It's the ongoing establishment, I should say, of the world government that's prophesied to be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a deep dive into this today because I really want you to understand the broad scope really here of what's really going on. First, let me mention First Cup Coffee. You know, you can imagine, with everything going on in the world, we're doing the best we can. We're staying up around the clock to keep up with everything. We're certainly energized and motivated by our God-given purpose. Thankfully, we're fueled by First Cup Coffee. These guys are a Christian-owned Patriot Coffee Company out of Texas. They have many different roasts for you to choose from, so go to firstcup.com. Use code ENDTIME to get 10% off. If you sign up for a subscription, they'll give you an additional 10% off. So go to firstcup.com, use code ENDTIME to get 10% off today. Before I go into this deep dive here, and I'm going to show you a video from Michelle Bachmann on one of the news networks, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I first have to announce that my wife and I will be down in Biloxi, Mississippi this weekend at the Pentecostals of the Gulf Coast, and Pastor Chadwick Kraft, and that's located at 1907 Pops Ferry Road, Biloxi, Mississippi, and we'll be there Saturday. This is we travel down there tomorrow, so we'll be there Saturday, April 27th at 6 p.m. And, of course, I'll be teaching the Green Horsemen in the World War III lesson, very, very relevant to what's going on in the Middle East right now, and it will affect all of the world before it's over with. We'll talk about that. And then Sunday morning on April 28th at 11 a.m., I'll be doing Breaking Prophecy News. We'll have a Q&A session. It's always a blast. Looking forward to seeing many of you down there. Haven't been down to Mississippi for a while. We used to do one in just north of Jackson, Mississippi for years and years and years and years and years. And I haven't been to Mississippi for a while, so looking forward to coming back down there and being with you guys in all the way down on the Gulf. Okay, now, the United Nations Summit of the Future. I want to make sure you guys understand what's really going on here, because I talked to you the other day about the World Health Organization and the pandemic treaty and everything that's going on there, and this vote that's coming up. And what they're really doing in all of this is setting the stage. It's really the ongoing establishment of a world governing body prophesied about in the Bible, but they're putting all the pieces in place. Many of the pieces they already have in place. And what they're wanting to do is to have a summit of the future in September at the United Nations to show how all of this is, how we join it all together and move straight off into a world governing body. And I saw a news article the other day, and Michelle Bachmann was on a video with a lady from OANN News, and she gave an interview. And to kind of set the stage for what I'm going to talk to you about and explain all this prophetically, I want you to see this video clip. It's almost 4 minutes long, but I think it's very important that you watch this and listen to her talk about global governance, because that's exactly what we've been talking about for years. It's the same world government that the Bible prophesies will be in power at the time of the second coming. Watch the video clip.
Here to discuss is Michelle Bachmann, Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. Michelle, thank you so much for being with us today. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Allison. Great to talk to you about this topic.
Yes, indeed. Well, Michelle, Tedros says they don't need or want a power grab, and any reports to the contrary regarding the pandemic treaty are just fake news. I mean, this is laughable, right? What is your reaction to this?
Well, then Tedros would have to burn all of the documents that they've put forward for what it is that they plan to do at the World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland at the end of May in 2020. They have their plans. They've put out their proposed international amendments to the international health rules. They've already put out their proposed pandemic treaty. They just now yesterday put out their final version. They were supposed to have it out in January. They waited until 1 month before. And what we know that their intent is to get through will be the requirement that the WHO will have the power to control travel and impose travel restrictions on individuals. And in all likelihood, then this would set up the requirement that every person have a digital passport. In other words, so that every individual has an identifiable QR code on their phone that would say whether the individual is up to date on mandated boosters, vaccines, whatever it is that the global authority mandates. So they intend to have that come through this May. But they're not stopping there, Allison. They're looking forward to September this fall, and that is called Summit of the Future. That's the annual meeting at the UN. So they plan to put part of this in place that is really creating a platform for global governance. Make no mistake about it, that's exactly the goal of the UN, a platform for global governance. And in part, they'll put it in place at the World Health Organization that's meeting in Geneva. But when they come together in September, anyone can go to the website. Anyone can go to the UN's website and type in Summit of the Future, Summit for the Future. And in there, all the goals are stated. They're very naked. They're very open about what their goals are. Their goals are global governance. And they will tell you as the reader reads their page, they will say that we've already know what our goals are. We have the global pandemic treaty. We have the Paris Climate Accord. We've got the human rights amendments. We have got the UN Charter. We already know what our goals are. Yeah. What they're trying to happen in September is how. How are we going to get to these goals? And that's where they want to put handcuffs on every individual nation and force every nation to go along with their global governance platform and put into effect the goals through all these various UN documents. So this is a pivotal year. Allison.
Yeah.
It'll be pivotal in with the World Health Organization, but it will also be pivotal in New York City in the end of September, when every nation on earth meets in New York City at the UN. Every head of every nation will be there. And we know that this was all being led by the Biden administration. They were the ones who were pushing this platform for global governance through the WHO.
Okay, so there you have it. I thought it was a very telling video here by Michelle Bachmann, because she's exposing these major efforts to push us, even the United States, under the Biden administration, straight off into world government. We would have to yield up much of our sovereignty to these world government efforts, and we certainly don't want that, right? This is the United States of America. We signed a Declaration of Independence that we would not come under the rulership of any other foreign entity. But now we have people that want to destroy America and push us straight into that, and to yield up the sovereignty of every single person listening to me, to yield up your sovereignty to a foreign entity, the United Nations. Even though it's located here in America, it's still not the government of the United States of America. Certainly not one that falls under our constitutional parameters, right? So she said, well, if you go to the United Nations website, they'll tell you exactly what they're wanting to do. Listen at this. The Summit of the Future. Now, this is going to happen in September of this year. They say it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to enhance cooperation on critical challenges and address gaps in global governance. Global governance is world government. I want to explain something right here. Let me pause. We were at the United Nations years ago. My father-in-law asked the guide. They said, oh, the United Nations is just an institution to help with global governance. My father-in-law said, what's the difference in global governance and world government? And the guy just stared at him. Well, that's going to be hard to define. I've heard people try to define it as, well, a world government would be all the nations of the world would answer this. It would have its own flag, and all of the borders would be done away with, and there would be a global state that answers to a world governing body. We don't have that. All of the nations are still independent from each other, blah, blah, blah. No, that simply is not the case. I have heard where the United Nations has said that there's only one true flag for all the nations of the world, and that is the blue flag of the United Nations. They've got it in their mind that this is a true world governing body. And when they talk about these things on their website, they say that this Summit of the Future is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to enhance cooperation on critical challenges and address gaps in global governance, or our world government we're trying to create. It goes on to say, and I'm quoting here, reaffirm existing commitments, including to the Sustainable Development Goals, I'll get to that in a moment, and the United Nations Charter, I'll also get to that in a moment, and move towards a reinvigorated multilateral system that is better positioned to positively impact people's lives. Or, if they were to really tell you what they meant, they would say to control people's lives. And then it says, building on the SDG Summit in 2023, member states will consider ways to lay the foundations for a more effective global cooperation or global control that can deal with today's challenges as well as new threats in the future. So they say we already have the what? We have all the entities that are designed to govern the planet. We also have the plan in the form of many existing agreements and commitments. And they say, starting with the UN Charter and including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the 2030 Agenda, or the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and many others. They tell you right there, these are the entities that we have and the plans laid out for a world governing body. And we have many entities to help run them. World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the International Criminal Court, many others. And of course, the United Nations sitting at the helm of all of it. Well, the Summit of the Future, they say, well, this is off their website. You can go read this. The Summit of the Future will look at the how, that we have the what. Like Michelle Bachmann said, They want the how. How do we cooperate better together to deliver on the above aspirations and goals? Or in other words, how do we better establish, work together to establish this world governing body, a true dictatorial world governing body that we really want? Because all of those things are designed to control people, if you know what they really are. And we'll talk about them. And it also says, how do we better meet the needs of the present while also preparing for the challenges of the future? So, I want you to know the Sustainable Development Goals. This is the core of all of it. This is their goal. ID 2020, the United Nations effort to number every person on the planet, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, the Council for Inclusive Capitalism with Linda Forster Rothschild, the International Criminal Court, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, and every other global governing institution, they are all working together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, every single one of them, because this is the core of it all. And they're saying, we've got the Sustainable Development Goals, that's already in play, and all these other things, but we need to work together to get these things across the finish line so we can have a fully functioning dictatorial world governing body. It's the same world government the Bible prophesies about in Revelation 13. So let me tell you about the Sustainable Development Goals very quickly. The Sustainable Development Goals, they were adopted by 193 member nations of the United Nations, including the United States back in 2015. They make up the international community's 15-year socialistic blueprint of world government or global governance for every person on the earth. And they call it the Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And they actually say this goal is a universal policy agenda designed to convert the nations of the world into a global community governed by the United Nations. The agenda is comprised of 17 main goals and 169 focused targets, and they're designed to manage the planet. Now, I say it's a socialistic plan because their plan includes the socialistic principle of wealth redistribution, or thievery is a synonymous term for it. And it states that the reduction of reduction of inequality is only possible if wealth is shared and income inequality is addressed. And I also refer to it as the global governance of every aspect of every person on the earth, because their plan actually states, we commit to making fundamental changes in the way our societies produce and consume goods and services. You've seen that lately, how they say, well, the way farmers are producing food, it's heating up the planet because of their emissions that they give off, and we need to change the way that we produce food. We need to grow our meat in labs, and that's the kind of meat you need to eat rather than having cows out on the hillside, okay? This is kind of the mindset these people have, that governments, international organizations, the business sector, and other non-state actors and individuals must contribute to changing unsustainable consumption and production patterns. We're seeing that happening in our news every day. Well, that's the Sustainable Development Goals. That is world government. That's one of the things they have listed on their website that they want to discuss in this Summit of the Future coming up here in September. They say we've got all these things in place. They're already marching straight forward. We're rolling them out. But we still don't have the fully functioning world governing body we want. We don't have the ability to stop war and dictate to people what we want them to do. You know, hey, there's a climate emergency. Lock down. Isolate in your house. Wear a mask. Take this vaccine. They want to be able to dictate to every person on the earth, this is what you do because we're the world government and you don't have a choice. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? This is the world government that the Antichrist will eventually usurp authority over 3.5 years prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. This world government is being established as we speak. But some of these big events are happening, and if it's not on your radar, it'll sweep you by, and then you wake up one morning and you've already got handcuffs on, and you don't know what happened. Now, I'm talking to people all over the world now. I know there are people all over the world that listen to these podcasts, and so I'm just saying there are many people that listen to us that will face some of these things. So, along with the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, they're really twin efforts designed specifically to govern the planet. One of them without the other is really pointless. One of the main areas of critical importance, they say, is the planet itself. According to this, they call it the 2030 Agenda, they say we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, taking urgent action on climate change, which is just a hoax, everybody. The climate is changing up and down every day. It's going to rain in Dallas tomorrow. It's not raining today. So they say we got to take care of all these things because so that it can support, the world can support the needs of the present and future generations. So this is the reason for the Paris Climate Agreement. Without a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse gas emissions and financial commitments, it is impossible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And President Trump knew about all this. That's why back in June of 2017, President Trump made this statement. He said, therefore, in order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens and of the United States, we are from the Paris Climate Agreement. The United States is going to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord because as of today, the United States is going to cease all implementation of this non-binding Paris Agreement and the draconian financial and economic burdens the agreement imposes on our country. He says this includes ending the implementation of the nationally determined contribution, and very importantly, we're going to end the Green Climate Fund, which is costing the United States a vast fortune. Folks, I told you, it's wealth redistribution or it's thievery. It's what it is. So Donald Trump pulled us out of it. Well, of course, Joe Biden turned right around and pushed us right back into it. And so that's the Paris Climate Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals. They're both mentioned on the website of this Summit of the Future. The other two that are the main ones that they mention in the Summit of the Future website is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and all of these, they are in many ways, they're all really used to support the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, that's the core. But at the end of the day, it's all world government. Well, this is exactly what Michelle Bachmann was talking about. She was saying the United Nations, it's a platform for world government, global governance. And she's saying this World Health Organization, the pandemic treaty and everything that's going to be voted on, and the Summit of the Future that's coming up here in September, it's all world government. And people that are rational thinkers, and like Michelle Bachmann, she's calling it straight out. And what she's saying is very, very true. I look at it from a prophetic perspective because it gives me a deeper insight even than most people have, because I know how all this is going to end up. But some people are very good at telling you what's happening right now, and she's one of them, letting us know what's going on. So I wanted you to be abreast of the situation here, because we're watching the establishment of this end-time world government. It's a 2,000-year-old prophecy, and it's going to be in play at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. All of this lets us know I've got to make myself ready to go. Whether the Lord comes for me today or if he comes for me in a few years, whenever he returns, I've got to make myself ready to go, and I want to recognize what's happening in the world in the events leading up to that. Okay, so I'm going to do a deep dive into the prophetic portions of the world government, but let me mention Birch Gold here first. You know, of course, we're talking about world government here. Globalist. The globalists want to impose digital currencies and digital IDs on the populations of the world. That's their goal. And it would allow officials to prohibit you from purchasing certain products or easily freeze or seize part of your bank accounts. In essence, it would enable governments and central banks to take more control over your finances. There are some concerned Americans that are diversifying their assets into physical gold. I know gold is like at an all-time high right now. And they're doing this with the help of Birch Gold Group. If you want a physical asset held in a tax-sheltered retirement account, go to birchgold.com/endtime to get your free info kit on gold. Maybe you've got an IRA or a 401k that you've had for years. Birch Gold can help you convert that into an IRA in gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny. And so go to birchgold.com/endtime, claim your free info kit on gold, because if digital currency does become a reality for all, you may want to have some gold to fall back on. All right, so let's go into the end time world government. This is one of my candy stick issues, one of the things that I just do not want to see established in the earth. Now, it's going to be. But man, once I've studied and read up on all this stuff, I didn't get any of this stuff in high school. Once I started reading this stuff, and really, I got much of my education after high school, really. And once I started listening about this, hearing my father-in-law, Irvin Baxter, talk about it, and I was reading through it and studying and reading books, The Creature from Jekyll Isle, and all this New World Order books, and following the old John Birch Society, which is the New American now, and finding out what really is going on. Wow. I realized this is going to hit all of us right in the face, you know. And it's something I don't want it to be implemented here in America. I wish the United Nations would go fall off into the ocean because we don't want them. We don't want a world government. And I know Jesus Christ is coming back to establish his true world government here before very long, but until then, we're going to have to deal with Satan's world government. You know, we hear the term New World Order, liberal international order, the global, we heard the term global governance, and many different things. The international community. We hear them more frequently today than ever, right? New World Order, but what is the New World Order? The New World Order is simply world government. It's not just any world government, but it's the world government of the Antichrist. The world government is being formed right now and is prophesied in the Bible. Now, it's been happening this way for decades. And again, on the backside of the break here, we're going to dive straight off into this because I want you to understand this is not happening by accident. There is a principal driver behind this, and it's Satan himself. That's not some kind of theory. I'm going to prove it to you scripturally.
A voice spoke to me and said, I've got something I want to show you. I was so sure God had talked to me. And I was stunned by what I saw.
A direct fulfillment of this over 2,500-year-old prophecy. The United States will stand with Israel.
Why haven't I ever seen this before?
1/3 of humanity will die. What do these beasts symbolize?
The lion, the bear, the leopard.
The combined beast from Revelation 13 represents the end-time government of the Antichrist. Understanding the end time.
Now streaming on Endtime Plus and available to order at endtime.com/UET. Go to endtime.com/UET or call 800-ENDTIME.
What if you could understand Bible prophecy? Dave Robbins, the host of the Endtime Show's TV and radio programs, is holding a free prophecy conference near you. Gain peace and understanding about what the Bible says concerning end-time prophecy. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com/events to see when Dave will be in a location near you.
You know, everybody, this is all very, very real. I was up, I mean, we've taught this for years and years and years, but I was up in Plymouth, Michigan this last weekend. I was talking to a guy about world government and different things, and I said, you know, the term New World Order is written on the back of the U.S. dollar bill. And he said, what? He was a new listener to us. And I said, it's the New World Order is written on the back of our U.S. dollar bill. He said, what? He pulled out a dollar bill. And I said, it's written right there in the ribbon under the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. And the ironic thing, it's not written in English, though. you'll find that it's written in Latin inside that ribbon, and it says Novus Ordo Seclorum. Look on your dollar bill right now. Novus Ordo Seclorum. The word novus means new. The word ordo means order. And the word world is secular or world. So, new world order. New order of the world. New world order. So the question is, why is this term written on the back of the U.S. dollar bill? I mean, this guy had like question marks in his eyeballs. What's been there since 1935 when President Franklin D. Roosevelt put it there. Franklin D. Roosevelt was he's a globalist. He dreamed of building a world government, and he was the driving force behind the establishment of the United Nations that was established back in 1945. This stuff didn't start happening yesterday. That's why over the years they've been building these institutions, these global governing wings of the United Nations, and putting them in place. But they've got to sell you on propaganda that, hey, this is a good thing for you. We're doing all of this in the best interest of the population. When at the end of the day, it's all devoted towards control, control, control. And so from back in 1935, and even since 1945 and the establishment of the United Nations, this world government has been being created. And but now you know that from this time forward, every time you hear the term New World Order, I want you to know that it's referring to world government. Revelation 13, 1 through 2. The Bible talks about John saw a beast come up out of the sea that had 10 horns, that had the body of the leopard, the feet of the bear, the mouth of the lion, the 10 horns of the 10-horn kingdom. These are symbolic of nations that have federalized into a one world governing body. And the Bible says the dragon, or Satan, gave it its seat, power, and its great authority. Folks, this is an amazing Bible prophecy. And all of these things are woven into the marvelous visions that God gave John while he was exiled out on the Isle of Patmos. Remember, this combined beast of Revelation 13 and the end time, that represents the end time world government, and the Antichrist, Revelation 13, 1 through 8, the United Nations is the only structure that is specifically designed to be a one world government system. Like the World Health Organization, that's only designed to cover the health part of it. It's not designed to govern the whole thing. That's the United Nations. You know, we frequently hear words like globalization and New World Order and things like that. So are globalization and the New World Order and the liberal international order and the terms global governance, are those good things or are those bad things? You're being sold the propaganda of the United Nations to say, hey, the population of the world is not sustainable, so we need to have all these rules and regulations and international laws to make sure that we can help you and your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to have a good life. We need to regulate everything so it can be sustainable. Folks, we can feed many, many, many more billions of people than we do on the earth right now. If you pulled the regulations off of our farmers, quit selling farms to the Chinese here in America, and started selling them, almost giving farmers land, and let them feed the world, we can feed many more people than there are right now. God has a way to sustain human populations much larger than what we have right now. They're selling you guys down the river. Don't pay any attention to that stuff. We can feed many, many, many more billions of people than we have right now. But because they're trying to do a world government, they're trying to sell you on the fact that there's so many existential threats. There's human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, and it's going to destroy us all. That's a hoax, everybody. I mean, why haven't, since the 40s, why haven't any of their existential threats and all of their prophecies about, we've only got 10 years to save the planet. You know what? None of that's come to pass. The polar bears are flourishing up north. The polar ice caps, they melt in the summer, they freeze back in the winter. I mean, God is regulating the temperature. God's got his hands on the thermostat every day. God's regulating this. It's not human beings. It's efforts towards a world government, everybody. Revelation 13:2 tells us the dragon gave this combo beast his power, seat, and great authority. Revelation 12:9 tells us the dragon is that old serpent, the devil, and Satan. So Satan is going to give this end-time world government its power, seat, and great authority. The one world government, the globalization process, and the New World Order that's forming right now is of the devil. Satan's trying to establish his physical kingdom here on the earth. Satan is the one inspiring it. It's not a good thing at all. That's why there's so much corruption and lies and propaganda and thievery, wealth redistribution. It's not a good thing. Revelation 13:2, and the dragon gave him his power, seat, and great authority. Remember that. That's not China. That's Satan. Ultimately, there is going to be a world governing body. There's not one thing any of us can do about it. We can cut the thing off from being here in the United States if everybody would just get their head right. But there will be a world government set up and ruled by Jesus Christ coming in the very near future. Now, that's the one I'm preparing for. But until then, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When anyone other than the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, rules a one world government, it's going to usher in a time of horrible tyranny. The Antichrist is going to be the most corrupt individual that has ever ruled any world government ever. Think about the pharaohs. Think about Nebuchadnezzar and all of the different people. But the Antichrist is going to be worse than all of them. The United Nations, again, is the only structure that is established on the planet for a world governing body. So what's the origin of the UN? Now, many of you that have been through our Understanding the End Time DVD series, you probably will have heard some of the things that I'm getting ready to tell you. But for all of the new listeners and the new subscribers to End of the Age Plus and different things, if you haven't been through Lesson 1 and 2 of our Understanding the End Time DVD series, then I want to fill you in on a few gaps here. Because most people, they won't tell you this stuff in high school or college. After World War I, which is, they called it the Great War, it was up until that point the worst war the world had ever known. Prior to that war, there had never been a war with near the number of casualties. I mean, World War I had just over 8 million dead. And the world said, oh, never again. I mean, it was from that the idea to establish a structure for global security was birthed, and the structure became known as the League of Nations. The League of Nations was formed in an attempt to ensure that another world war would never be fought. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, he championed the idea, but the U.S. Congress hesitated at the idea of being part of a world governing body. They didn't want to surrender all of the U.S. sovereignty, so they voted against it. And because Wilson couldn't carry his own government into the League of Nations, it quickly dismantled and fell apart, right? I mean, you guys, you know your history, right? Well, 20 years later, that crisis wasn't big enough. 20 years later, here comes World War II. That ended in over 52 million casualties. And, of course, the cry for world security became louder than ever, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he believed in a world government. Remember, he was responsible for the term New World Order being printed on the back of the dollar bill. Well, at the end, I thought it was awesome to see this guy's face when I showed him that on the back of a dollar bill this last weekend. Man, he was just shocked. I love seeing that when I tell that to people for the first time. They're like, oh my goodness, this stuff is real. And I'm like, it's very real. So at the end of World War II, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt, they came together at a meeting in Yalta. And that was an effort to end all war, right? I mean, it was during those meetings that the charter for the concept of the global government structure was called the United Nations. That's where it was written. One key American man responsible for the formation of the United Nations was a man named Alger Hiss. he organized the American delegation, and he served as the acting Secretary General at the first UN meeting. Go to the United Nations today, there are no pictures of Alger Hiss, even though he was the first acting Secretary General. So Hiss also served on the steering and executive committees and was charged with the responsibility of actually writing the charter. But after he played such a dominant role in the developing of the Charter of the United Nations and in the founding conference, 3 years later, Alger Hiss was convicted in U.S. courts of lying. He committed perjury to cover his activities because it was found out that he was a communist spy. And he lied about that. So, previous to that, Alger Hiss had accompanied Franklin Roosevelt to Yalta, the Yalta Conference, and that's where at Yalta they had the carving up of Europe by the United States. That's where the carving up of Europe by the United States and Russia took place. This is after World War II. At that time, Roosevelt was a dying man, and consequently, Alger Hiss, who was a communist spy, carried the bulk of the negotiations for America. Well, so think about this. You ever wonder why Russia got so much of Eastern Europe after World War II? I mean, what Russia did not win on the battlefield, she won at the peace table because her own agent, Alger Hiss, was assisting Roosevelt with the negotiations. And that explains why Russia received so many concessions at the peace table at the end of World War II, because Russia had their guy on both sides of the table. Well, you can get a pretty good deal when that happens, right? But what are they doing? They're establishing a system of world government. Hiss designed the United Nations to be a global union of socialist republics. The emblem of the Soviet Union was a globe with two sheaves of wheat around it, and with the hammer and sickle superimposed. Remember the Soviet Union flag, the hammer and a sickle? Well, the emblem of the United Nations is also a globe with two olive branches around it. It looks almost identical. And when the insignia of the United Nations was designed, of course, the hammer and sickle was left off because that was, including that would have been too obvious, right? However, Hiss designed the structure of the United Nations to ultimately become a world socialistic government. And of course, Hiss went to prison, but the United Nations has continued until this day to be a structure for the one world government system. Not one word of that charter has ever changed. They still function under that same charter.
They that understand what is taking place will instruct many.
Except a man is born again, he can't enter or see the kingdom of God.
I don't care what label you've been given or what label you've given yourself, you are essential. You still matter.
This is a journey, and when we get to the other side of that, that's where our prize is, that's where our reward is.
End time is not going anywhere.
Welcome back, everybody. And before I get into globalization and globalism, let me mention Ready Pantry. Of course, as Americans, we want to believe, my whole life, the grocery stores have always been there. But of course, we saw a few years ago the supply chains could quickly collapse, food supplies could diminish. And so we've got to pray for the best, but yes, we got to prepare, right? What if there was a way you could have an affordable emergency supply of food? Stuff that you could store So you didn't have to, beat the door down at the grocery store if something happened overnight or something came upon us we weren't aware of. You could have some food, you put water in it, heat it up, good to go. Well, ReadyPantry.com/endtime, they offer amazing 25-year shelf-stable food, and it includes lunch, dinner, even desserts, breakfast, not to mention the peace of mind you get to know that you've got a supply of food for any kind of catastrophe. Ready Pantry is an American-based company. All the products are sourced here in America. You're not going to be disappointed. Many long-term food storage companies on the internet, they sell their products that have been sitting in the warehouse for 10 years. Ready Pantry doesn't do that. They deliver the freshest products that have been packaged within the last couple months, and that's what's going to be delivered to your door. So Ready Pantry, they offer discounts of up to 20% off for 3 to 12 month supplies. Go to ReadyPantry.com/endtime, use code endtime, and save an additional 10% off on your order, plus free shipping on all orders. So you can also stock your pantry with buy now, pay later options available at checkout by going to ReadyPantry.com/endtime. Okay, now, another thing I want you to know about is globalization or globalism, because we have globalists in the White House, people that want, and many of them, and they're trying to weaken America so socialism can be pushed here, and we can't resist that. Okay? That's what's going on in America right now. We are yielding up much of our sovereignty, not protecting our border, our allies and our enemies see us as very, very weak. Not because our military is weak, but because the leadership of that is weak. I had a pastor tell me that just a few weeks ago, and who is he's one of the head planners for our nuclear subs. I did a prophecy conference for him. We talked about it. He had worked at on our nuclear subs for the last 40 plus years. And he told me, he said, man, our military is above everybody. But he said, we have a very weak leadership. So it renders, our military is just kind of held back, like pulling the reins back on a horse. And because we have very weak leadership, you guys. So, globalism is simply the belief that the nation state, or let's say America, the nation state is obsolete. That served its time, we're done with that. And that the world must move into a system of global governance. That's globalism. It's the #1 issue coming up in our presidential election, by the way, in my opinion. So globalists believe national borders, that they should be dissolved and a one world government system should be instituted. I've said it many times. We'll probably say it many more times. You remember a guy named Strobe Talbott? He wrote an article called "The Birth of a Global Nation" for Time magazine back in 1992. He said, and I'm quoting, within the next 100 years, nationhood, or the nation state as we know it, that's going to be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. Well, 2 years later, Strobe Talbott was tapped by President Bill Clinton to serve as a Deputy Secretary of State, where he pushed his global governing agenda until the end of the Clinton presidency in 2001. I remember seeing a video where Strobe Talbott was asked about that. Hey, how can you talk about globalism and world government without it being political poisoning? And Strobe Talbott was talking about different ways of talking about that. And he said, I work for a liberal internationalist. Talking about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a globalist. Strobe Talbott, a liberal internationalist, is a globalist. Same thing. And so in his answer, Strobe Talbott said, well, I work for a liberal internationalist, so it's kind of hard for me to hide what I really am. Bill Clinton was a globalist, folks. So this emerging world government has been promoted for decades. James Warburg, who was the son of Paul Warburg, who authored the Federal Reserve Act, which really created our Federal Reserve that we have today. He said this to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee back on February 17th of 1950. Now, again, this didn't start yesterday. This has been being built for years and years and years and years. He said, and I'm quoting, "We shall have a world government whether you like it or not, by conquest or consent." Now, this is American people. This isn't Russia, China. This is America. Council on Foreign Relations member Richard Gardner, he was writing in April 1974 in one of the issues of the Council on Foreign Relations Journal on the Foreign Affairs. He stated, the New World Order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. But in the end runaround, national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. He said that during his speech at the UN, September 22, 1997. And so he said that to a Council on Foreign Relations article. And then Bill Clinton said at his speech in September 22, 1997, he said, the forces of global integration are a great tide, inexorably wearing away at the established order of things. The United Nations must play a leading role in this effort, filling in the fault lines of the new global era. Before the century ends, we should establish a permanent international court to prosecute the most serious violations of humanitarian law. The World Court is the place individuals on trial without the protection of the U.S. Constitution or the Bill of Rights. That was adopted by the world community in July of '98, and it was then ratified and came into force in 2002. What are they doing? They're creating a world governing body. I mean, we have the three branches, executive, legislative, and judicial. Well, they have that for a world government now. In his memoirs by David Rockefeller, page 405, published back in 2002, David Rockefeller, the chairman of the board of the Chase Bank, many of you know the Rockefeller family, he said this, and I'm quoting, he said, some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalist and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. Now get this, everybody. Rockefeller said, if that's the charge, I stand guilty and am proud of it. David Rockefeller, the founder of the Trilateral Commission, he stated this in an address at the meeting of the Trilateral Commission in 1991. He said, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. He said it would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the work is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. They're not even trying to hide what they're doing, folks. And this is exactly what Michelle Bachmann is saying in the video I showed you earlier. They're already saying, here's what we've already got the plan in place. The institutions to carry it out are in place. Now at this Summit of the Future in September, we're going to lay out how we move forward with all of this to create the one world governing body. They say on their website to fill in any gaps in this world government that we're trying to create, this global governance. On January 18th of 2017, at the World Economic Forum, just 2 days before President Trump's inauguration on January 20, Joe Biden devoted his last speech as vice president to protecting the New World Order, the world government, and the liberal international order, which are all synonymous terms. And Joe Biden said this, and I'm quoting, he said, for the past 7 decades, the choices we have made, particularly the United States and our allies in Europe, have steered our world down a clear path. It was toward the path of world government, everybody. He said, our careful attention to building a sustainable and liberal international order with the United States and Europe at its core was the bedrock of the success of the world enjoyed in the second half of the 20th century. Today, it is imperative that we act urgently to defend the liberal international order. These guys realized, because Donald Trump had been talking so much about it, that he may not play ball with all of this. So Joe Biden, 2 days before he's inaugurated, or 2 or 3 days before he's inaugurated, he gives this speech. He said, defending the liberal international order requires that we resist the forces of European disintegration and maintain our long-standing insistence on a Europe whole, free, and at peace. It is only by championing the liberal international order, or the world government, by continuing, I said world government, that which is the liberal international order. He said, by continuing to invest in our security, reaffirming our shared values, and expanding the cause of liberty around the world, that will retain our position of leadership. So it's easy to see that Joe Biden is a globalist. He has been for decades, and he fully advocates yielding American citizens' sovereignty to a world governing body. So if he has a chance to go around Congress and sign this pandemic treaty with the World Health Organization coming up here in May, what do you think he's going to do? You got to think about that. You say, Dave, I'm just worried about paying my bills, and look, I am too. I buy gas at the same gas station you go to, and my wife buys groceries at the same place that you guys buy it at, and I'm just saying, I'm dealing with all of this too, but I'm not going to let this world sweep me by, and I'm doing the best I can. What's my goal? My goal is to preach and teach the gospel of the Christ until Jesus Christ comes. We're in the end time. But the Bible tells us about that, because God did not want us going through these end times with blinders on. We're exposing Satan's kingdom, because there are people in the world that are advocating for this mess. And there are people that the mark of the beast will be the global economic sanctioning system of this world government to get everybody to bow down to their edicts. And if we don't warn you about this stuff, people could get sucked up into that and think, well, it's just another number, and, you know, the world government's not such a bad thing. No. Jesus told us, Revelation 13 says that the world governing body is driven by Satan himself. Satan gives it its seat, power, and its great authority. So I cannot comply with this in any way. And so if you don't know about it, then you could think, well, it's not such a bad thing. They're all doing it for my good, right? No, they're not. It's all about control. It's totalitarianism. It's dictatorial edicts. And that's what the world government is. It will be usurped authority over by the Antichrist in the end time and driven by Satan himself.